folks, my name is Jen, and today I'm going to talk to you about everything that I read in January. So over the course of January I read 10 books. So how we're going to do reviews, how I do my little wrap up is going to be slightly different in that we're going to check in on how I'm doing with things that I'm picking per seasonal TBR. How am I doing, or how have I done in this previous month as far as those goals that I've set for every seasonal TBR? Where I'm at on the TBR, like were those books on that like seasonal TBR, or how I'm doing with my goals, such as at least one nonfiction book a month, at least one classic book a month, at least one of my Nightstand of Shame books a month, and also where I'm at in the year-long book challenge thing that I'm doing. So first up, we can check in on my TBR. So as far as TBR goes, I did have a couple of books that I read that I believe were on my seasonal TBR, but I think I will leave that specific check-in for the end of February, so my February wrap-up, to see how I did on trying to stay within my seasonal TBR as much as possible. So as far as those like monthly check-ins, how did I do on the... First, I guess we'll talk about how did I do with the book challenge, the year-long book challenge that I'm taking part in. So this book challenge is Freedom Reads. It is a banned and challenged book challenge that MJ from Reading This Life is hosting over on Storygraph. So I talked about this in my like plans for the year video that I released, I don't know, what was that, a couple weeks ago or whatever. So there's 14 prompts, so 14 books to read over the course of a year. How did I do with that? Well, 12 months in a year, 14 prompts. I knew that I was going to have to squeeze a couple extra in here and there, but I am actually completely caught up at the moment because I read 3 books, so completing 3 of the prompts in January. And I'm currently way through a 4th prompt, and we are now in the beginning of February. So yeah, I read 3 books, and we'll go through those. First of them was also the book that I started off the year with. The one that I started the year off with was Heartstopper, Volume 1 by Alice Oseman. This is a graphic novel, and it is the only graphic novel I read this past month, and it is also, again, is fulfilling one of those prompts, which was to read a banned book that is fairly recent, so like 2022 today. Full disclosure, this first volume I believe was from 2018 or 2019, so not exactly in 2020, but I believe this is still an ongoing series, and the other books have come out since then, so I kind of counted it, and I do plan on reading the other books in the series when I let myself go back to the bookstore. It is an absolutely cute graphic novel. It is following 2 teenage boys in England. So you have Charlie, who's a little bit shy and kind of quiet, and he ends up sitting next to popular rugby player Nick in class, and over time the two form a friendship that eventually it starts kind of turning into something a little bit more. I found this to be absolutely adorable, and I 100% understand now where everyone was coming from when they would just go insane about this book series. I had watched the first like episode or 2 of the show, and also was enjoying it, but I realized that I actually wanted to read the books before I continued with the show. I knew it was probably going to be really good and really cute, and exactly, really good, really cute. I thought that the artwork was very kind of simplistic, but at the same time, just very cute, very good at just completely capturing emotions, sweet and adorable. Like I said, the two boys, their friendship already was very cute, but then them kind of dancing around things, like Charlie having a crush on Nick, and Nick, who previously assumed thought he was pretty straight, but now is starting to realize, oh, maybe I'm not perfectly straight like I thought. Just the discovery of that, their friendship molding into something more, the way they're there for each other, just the humor, everything is just so incredibly adorable. I really can't wait to see where this series goes. I have a general idea, I guess, about where it's going to go, because I guess these are characters in another story by Alice Oseman, and they're talked about in that. I only knew that because I was looking up other books that she'd written. So, I knew about that. So, yeah, I'm expecting just cute things. I know there's probably going to be some adversity. There was a little bit in here. But I think this is going to be just a really great series, and yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading more of this. This is cute. It's such a cute dog. Anyway, yeah, looking forward to reading the rest of this series, and adding further to my graphic novel collection in general. I'm really happy about all the graphic novels that I have been finding over the past couple of years. I mean, I knew the classics, obviously, and have wanted to collect them and have a couple of them, like Alan Moore's, and stuff like that. I have a lot of those, but I'm really loving a lot of other graphic novels that are kind of coming out of the woodwork now, within the past couple of years. It's just really cool, you know, to see more powerful stories, and also just really cute stories, everything being shown in that medium, as well, not just like your standard written word novel, prose novel, and things like that. Yeah. Anyway, I gave this 5 stars. Perfect way to start off the year. Then another of the books that I finished for that prompt was Timequake by Kurt Vonnegut. This is a classic, so I also fulfilled my desire of reading a classic book in January. And yeah, like I said, it fulfills one of the prompts. It is the prompt to read a book by an author who's frequently censored. I am not 100% sure if Timequake has been censored, but his most famous work, Slaughterhouse-Five, has frequently been censored. You know, we just can't have an anti-war novel, apparently. So this book is chaos. It is just completely chaos. I still don't know how to describe, summarize this book, really. Kurt Vonnegut is a character within here. In a couple of his other books, I'm thinking specifically of Slaughterhouse-Five, he is definitely kind of a character in it, and it's hard to say where he as a character ends and some of the things that happen within the story of that character. Billy Pilgrim starts, things are kind of all together, and that's also sort of how Timequake goes, only Kurt Vonnegut himself is most directly a character. He's not just like a narrator telling a story, he's not just telling his story, but also relating another story that is not true, but also parts of it are kind of true because they're also from his life or of people he knew. Like that kind of confusing amalgamation of things. Timequake is, Kurt Vonnegut is 100% a character within this story, and he's right smack dab in the middle of everything from beginning to end. This is very wibbly wobbly, timey-wimey kind of book. Basically, the world is going as it is, and then one day, on February 13th, 2001, specifically, there is a timequake that happens in which time, as we know it, stops working and then starts going backward suddenly to 10 years prior, and everyone in the whole universe is aware of it, but they just have to continue doing exactly what they did, the fuck-ups they had, the joys, the horrors, the successes, everything of the previous 10 years. They have to relive it all and do it all exactly the same again. They let their free will go because they're just kind of like Flossom and Jetsam being pushed along by the waves, essentially. They're just kind of doing whatever the universe wants, and then suddenly when they get back to that date again, they are suddenly pushed down to the world with free will again, but it's been so long that they don't know how to deal with it. So suddenly you have cars going out of control, planes falling out of the sky, a lot of terrible shit, because everybody's trying to like realize, oh shit, now we're caught up and I have to use my free will to do and say things again, but they're just kind of like completely overwhelmed by this situation. And there's only a couple of people, maybe, one in particular, the famous sci-fi author Kilgore Trout, who was aware of this whole entire thing and is right there to save the day, of course, as he does. So yeah, like I said, Kurt Vonnegut gets kind of involved in this story, and he's also telling his part in like the timequake, but at the same time he's mostly relating how other people, including to Kilgore Trout, dealt with this timequake, both before, during, after, the events involving later. It's very all over the place, very weird. Honestly, there were a couple of passages that I had to read a couple of times because I myself was a little bit confused, and I was like, ooh, wait a second, what was that? It wasn't like a bad confusion or anything like that. I was still 100% entertained the entire way through this. This is, after all, it's a Vonnegut classic. Some things are a little fatalistic. It's poking fun at a lot of things. It's poking fun at society, how we run things, how we run things in this country, how people are and have been throughout time. It's about a lot of stuff, and it's part fiction, part memoir almost. He also is talking a lot about grief in here as well. He mentions a lot about the people that he has lost, because up until this point he has had very tragic things happen. He makes a couple of references to his time in Dresden as a POW and the firebombing of Dresden during World War II, which is largely what Slaughterhouse-Five is about. He makes references to that sometimes. He makes references to friends that he has now lost who knew him from that time. He makes references to the unfortunate suicide of his mother when he was younger, the unfortunate sudden sickness and loss of his dear sister, and then the accident that killed her husband, and how he ended up taking in him and his wife ended up taking in his nephews and raising them along with their own children. And it's dealing also a lot with time and grief and relating back to time intertwined with that, and it's, yeah, I don't really know how to talk about this book other than saying there is so many things going on in it that the only thing I can really tell you about this book is that you need to read it to fully understand and appreciate what is happening in this novel. I highlighted a bunch of sentences in here. Everything that kind of struck me as, some things were funny, some things are funny, some things are profound. One thing he said is, people are so smart you can't believe it, and people so dumb you can't believe it, people so nice you can't believe it, and people so mean you can't believe it. Just kind of talking about humanity Or then he has funny things to say. Like, they say the first thing to go when you're old is your legs or your eyesight. It isn't true. The first thing to go is parallel parking. He's also, I almost forgot, the death of his first wife. So he was on his second marriage, I believe, at this point, and his first wife also had recently passed away, and so he's also dealing with a lot of grief about that. And the other thing was his brother was just diagnosed with cancer, so he also had that going on. So yeah, grief and time are very much intertwined within this book, and a lot of grappling with things, grappling with politics, grappling with religion. It's just a lot of things happening within this book. A lot of different quotes, like I said, I highlighted because I thought they were funny or profound. And there were parts of this that were hard to read, parts of it that I laughed at, parts of it that made me emotional. There was a passage or two that felt like I was gonna make my anxiety go off the rails, but it's such an interesting book. A lot. And while some parts of this were definitely outdated, honestly, for the most part, it's really hard to believe how relevant some of the things he was talking about in here. Like he says, the time quake takes place in 2001. This book was published in 1997, so we weren't even at that part yet. And yeah, there's things that he says in here and different stuff that he relates that are just, they are so relatable to now, and it also, yeah, it hurts that they're still relatable when they shouldn't be at this point. They should all be outdated, but it's not. I really loved this book. I gave this book 5 stars. It definitely has not surpassed God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater, but I will put it right on par with how I feel about Slaughterhouse-Five right now. I really loved this, and I actually had to stop myself from getting any more of his books at the moment because I finished it and went right on to thrift books and was like, how many of his books can I get a hold of right now? And I had to like take a breather and be like, girl, you need to read some more books before you get any more. One other thing I can tell you about this book, an interesting thing. I posted about it on my Instagram, but if you aren't over there, you didn't see that. A fun thing that I found at one point in here, right actually by the epilogue, I found a treasure in this book from a previous owner. It is a bookmark from Bank Square Books. The funny part about that is that at the time, when I was reading this book, I was also using a bookmark from Bank Square Books in Connecticut that I had bought on a weekend girls trip that I did with a couple of my friends a couple of years ago. We were staying in Mystic. Our purpose there was to hang around Mystic Village and go to the aquarium and everything, but we did end up taking a stop at Bank Square Books. And yeah, so I bought a couple of books there. I received that bookmark as like a complimentary thing. So it was really funny to then find an old bookmark, most likely from the 90s or early 2000s, from Bank Square Books. And I did not get this book there, but I got this at the Book Barn, which is also in Connecticut, just a little further away. So, I don't know, that felt good. Felt like interesting, but also felt good. The last of the books for the challenge that I finished in January was Howl and Other Poems by Allen Ginsberg, and this fulfilled the prompt of reading a banned poetry collection. So this collection, I have to say, I honestly still don't fully know how I feel about reading this collection. There were a couple of his poems that I thought I had read before, including Howl itself, but while I was reading this collection, I realized that they were not the poems that I had thought of. And now I'm questioning if I have indeed ever read Allen Ginsberg before. I'm gonna say I probably have at some point, because I did take a lot of literature classes for my degree in college, so I would assume at some point I came across Mr. Ginsberg's work. But this collection, it's a very cute little pocket collection. Yeah, I don't honestly know how I feel about the entire thing. There are a couple of portions in here that I underlined because I found the passages to be profound or entertaining, or I was very interested. At one point, one of them, there was some reference to a couple of things that I looked up, and I made little notations for myself about what they were. And yeah, I had an interesting time reading this. I think my favorite poem out of the bunch was called A Supermarket in California. Because I really liked the storytelling there, and I really enjoyed what was going on in that one. I did like some other passages here and there. The poem America was like, that was rough. And yeah, just very interesting collection overall. Definitely not what I was expecting, I guess, but still interesting. I know interesting is like a very like damning word of oof. I had a professor in college that would get kind of like peeved at you if you used interesting as a descriptive word, and he'd be like, you can't say that. You have to use other words to mean what you say, or say what you mean, or you get me. The thing is that this collection, while I can 100% clearly see the talent that went into the writing of this, and I can clearly see a lot of the emotions that are behind this, and I can see the clear efforts to push back against like societal ways and the establishment of the day that he came out with this collection and everything. And I can 100% a couple of them not understand, because I don't support the banning of any books at all, but I located a couple of passages where I was like, that's probably why it was banned, huh? Ooh. While I can clearly see all of that, the thing is that ultimately this book was not really my cup of tea. Yes, I did notate one poem, Supermarket in California. That was my favorite poem. I did enjoy, I would say, most of the poem America is very hard-hitting. A couple of other ones made me like audibly having reactions to them, whether they be laughter or like a whoa or stuff like that. You know, I could interesting metaphors thrown in here and there. You know, I did still find lines throughout that I underlined, made notations under things I was very like interesting in, but I think when it comes down to it, at the end of the day, I learned a couple of things from this collection, which I probably should have realized before, at least one of them. This collection I probably should have realized before by other poets of this particular genre, which I think is technically under the beat genre of poetry. I haven't read that many, but again, have come across some of it before, because I have really liked poetry since I was a kid, and also I think everyone finds beat poetry at some point and goes through a phase of reading it, or maybe I'm just weird, I don't know. The conclusions that I came to is that, number one, beat poetry is not my thing. I can't comment on how I felt about it as a teenager, because there's a lot of things I liked when I was a teenager that I am now like, why What's wrong with you? But yeah, as of right now, looking at B poetry such as this, I don't think it's my thing. I'm not big on the stylistic choices. I think that's mostly the thing. And number two, quite honestly, it felt like the entire time the poet was sitting in a grubby rail car, which he makes reference to actually hanging out in rail cars and in rail yards with other people or by himself several times. So accurate. It felt like the whole time he was just sitting in a grubby rail car thinking, yes, yeah, I can just picture it, because I know, because I was an angsty poet at one time back in the day. I still am on occasion. I can just picture him just sitting there and being like, yeah, this'll be edgy, this'll really get him, this'll get him. Like, that kind of like image in my head of thinking, oh yeah, I'm sticking it to the man with these words. I'm so fucking edgy. I could picture that 100%. And, just thinking, oh, this'll show everybody how smart I am. 100%. I said this in my review online. Reiterating it again. Now, if you're a super fan of Allen Ginsberg, if you know more about him as a person, I did just a cursory glance about him and talking about this collection afterwards, because I was like, so why was this so poorly received? Like, I can see a couple of choices that he made that are probably why people have a problem with it. There's a lot about... No, I'm not going to talk about that. There's a lot about... There's a lot about some sexual stuff in here that I can imagine probably upset people back in the 60s, and also probably today as well. So that was my assumption of what that was a problem, but I guess there's also some controversy because of someone he wrote a poem for, someone he referenced in here, was like upset that he used him in that and was like, those interactions aren't true, and I don't know, there's like some controversy and stuff like that. So, there's a lot more, going on, but if you know more about the poet himself than me, please correct me. But yeah, it just kind of felt like he was like very smart and very edgy while he was writing this entire collection. But if that's not the case, just let me know. But that's just kind of how this entire collection felt and how I perceived it, basically, which is honestly a shame, because I can tell throughout a lot of the lines in here that he did care about what he was trying to get across. He did care about sticking it to the man and everything like that, and raging against the machine, if you will. But I guess it just kind of got a little bit to like our modern day edgelords online in here at different points. So yeah, interesting collection. I'm glad I read it. I don't know what else I'm going to read by Allen Ginsberg. I might take some more forays into his poetry at some point, but in the future I think I might get out of the library instead of buying my own collection. But yeah, glad I read it anyway. I gave it like 3 stars. Now, my other challenges. So those were the books for the reading challenge. So I've completed 3. Like I said, I'm totally caught up at the moment. What else was I trying to read over the course of everything? Well, like I said, I read a classic. That checked off a box. I also read another classic, which I'll talk to you about in a minute. But what else was I trying to get to? I needed to read a nonfiction book this month, and I needed to read a Nightstand of Shame book this month. Did I read a Nightstand of Shame book? I did not, actually. I made a little bit of progress in a couple of those, but I did not actually complete any of my Nightstand of Shame. But what else? Nonfiction. I needed to read a nonfiction book this month, and I did indeed complete that. The nonfiction book that I read was Good Stuff, A Reminiscence of My Father by Cary Grant, and this is by his only child, Jennifer Grant. So, this book, like it says, reminiscence of her dad. This is telling about her life growing up with her very famous father, her experiences with that, and also a little bit about his life before she came around, what she can glean, what she knows of, and also addressing some rumors and things that went around about his life. Cary Grant, as everyone probably knows him, he was a famous actor of the silver screen, one of those big time ones. He starred in movies with Katharine Hepburn and Jimmy Stewart and Audrey Hepburn and so many other people. He was friends with a lot of different famous people. I have been a fan of him since I was a kid. My mom is a big fan of him. My grandmother was a fan of his. Growing up watching his movies, so I really liked being able to get a more personal insight into his life in general. What to say about this book? It was written in parts in a stream of conscious like way that maybe not really stream of conscious, I don't know. It was written in such a way that at times was a little bit hard to read. Alright, full disclosure, I am in a different outfit. The lighting's probably a little bit different, but that is because my batteries died yesterday, so here we are, take 2. I can't remember what I was saying about good stuff, so we're just gonna go with whatever. This is a memoir of Jennifer Grant's life growing up with her dad, the very famous Cary Grant. It's chock full of really sweet photos of them throughout the years. It's really cute. Family photos, photos of the places they were. There's also like scans of like postcards and letters and varying types of things that her dad saved. Her dad, she says in the beginning of the book, was somewhat of a little bit of a hoarder when it came to memories, specifically memories about her. And it seems like maybe he was quite aware he was having her so late in life, she was his only child, that he was very aware of the fact that he would probably be gone. He would not be around for, you know, most of her life. It seems like he was quite aware of that, and he was trying to find ways to capture these memories, not only because they were dear to him, but also because he knew that she would appreciate it later. That seems to be the general vibe of his hoarding of recordings and videos and letters and drawings and different varying things that are relating to her over the years. He apparently was also a little bit of a photographer, and he filmed a lot and did a lot of different things. He was apparently involved in, so I found out some interesting things about Cary Grant. All I really knew about him, I didn't even know he had any kids until I saw this book. I'd known, you know, that he was this famous star. He was originally from like England. He was in a lot of big time movies with a lot of famous people. He presumably lived in California. Those were basically the things that I knew about him. So it was kind of interesting to see a little bit more about him, learn a little bit more about his life, learn more about his friends. He was friends with like Frank Sinatra, which I guess tracks for the time period. He was friends with Grace Kelly, which also I guess tracks, and also Rainier of Monaco, because of course she married him, so that was interesting. I didn't realize he was involved in a lot of different businesses. He was involved in like a racetrack. He was involved in like Fabergé, the company that makes those eggs. He had a lot of like business acumen and interests and things that he was into too, which is interesting. But also, I guess, kind of commendable, I guess, because when he and his wife at the time had his daughter, he retired. And then he also but he still kept kind of working because he was on these committees and he did these other things. So that's like kind of interesting. But yeah, so there were sections of this that I found really fascinating, very interesting, just learning more about someone who, you know, I've seen on the screen all the time but didn't really know that much about. So that was interesting. I liked getting some more insight into their relationship as someone who has a fairly close relationship with my dad. I appreciate hearing about father-daughter relationships and stuff. And a lot of this is pretty cute, but I will have to say that there's also a lot of this that dragged on a bit. It did take me a little bit to get through this because I kept having to put it down because I could feel myself rolling my eyes a little bit, and I feel bad to have been rolling my eyes at different like passages and chapters and stuff, but I don't know, some of this book felt a little bit like now the rich people whine about being rich or about being famous. It felt a little bit like that. Now, I don't want to be that type of person because I mean, I can't fully understand, but I can empathize, I guess, with someone who, yeah, you're doing things, this is your job, this is something you're passionate about and whatever, but that doesn't mean you don't also deserve some amount of privacy or respect from others that unfortunately you might not always get because people are just impossible. Yeah, I can also I can also understand that too. That's why I feel bad kind of being like, okay, I'm so sorry you had summers in Monaco at the palace. My God, I'm so sorry what tragic childhood you had. But I'm also trying to not fully be like that because that's not the way to be. So different points of it, I was kind of rolling my eyes a little bit about. There's just a lot of name dropping and a lot of look at us and all these wonderfully expensive luxurious things that we did. While at the same time, there were a lot of other things that they did which wasn't quite so much, or he very much was trying to instill in her a work ethic and an appreciation for simpler things. I don't know. So those are my mixed feelings in general about the memoir. Just even though, yes, I did indeed find a lot of it to be really interesting. The other thing is that I think she wrote this entirely herself, which that's perfectly fine and good. But there was just some ways that chapters ran, or little tidbits where they were placed, or the way things were phrased, or how they were put together. Bits and pieces of it felt a little bit almost stream of consciously, or just kind of weird, and I was like, I feel like you could have edited that better. Sometimes in general it's just hard to write about personal things, especially in like a memoir format. Sometimes it helps to have like somebody else that you're running things by, that you're working off of, which I'm sure she had like an editor and everything, but yeah, it just kind of felt like maybe there could have been a little bit more cohesion with like some of the chapters and different anecdotes that were thrown in here. But those are really my only complaints about this. Otherwise, I think this was very sweet memoir. I think it was really good to get some more insight into Cary Grant, although a couple of things I was like, yeah. What did I give this? I gave Good Stuff 4 stars. So let's see, what else did I talk about? So that was those, and I said the classic I read fulfilled my classic thing, but I also read one other this month, and it was The Moonstone by Wilkie Collins. So this one is another hard one to describe, I guess. It is a detective novel at the heart of it, I guess. It's an pretty early detective novel, I guess, because I think this was this pre-Sherlock Holmes? It says The Moonstone, a romance, and there is indeed romance also at the heart of this novel. It's hard to describe it because of how much is happening in this book. Basically, at the heart of the book is the Moonstone, which is a crystal. It's actually yellow, which is interesting because I have a couple of moonstones and they are not yellow. So I know a bit about crystals, but I don't know a super big ton, so I should probably look that up. Oh shit, I guess it does kind of come in kind of yellowy color: white, cream, yellow, blue, and green. That's kind of what a moonstone is. Um, this is this big, fat, yellow crystal. And it is cursed. Or that's what the general kind of thought is. And the reason why it is thought to be cursed is not only was it forcibly removed from the statue of an Indian deity, forcibly removed, also resulting in the slaughtering of a whole bunch of lives to get at this thing. The greed that was surrounding it is basically a bloodstone, if you catch my drift. It's not good things. Also to the point of getting this stone and how it was gotten and the reports that were made, the guy who got it was basically shunned by everyone. He got into a lot of trouble. He was shunned by his own family. He was shunned by society for the terrible things that he did. This was at the time when England was in India, colonizing the fuck out of it. So, yeah, but the shit that he did was so fucking terrible that it was, yeah, he basically completely shunned. And so everybody started saying, well, it's probably cursed because of what he did to get it, and the shit that goes on in his life. It brings nothing but misfortune upon everyone, basically. And it gets to the point where he has died, and it gets put into the hands of a young man who is to deliver it to his cousin on her, her 18th birthday or her 21st birthday, I can't quite remember. And the thought is that this wasn't like a good present, it's that this guy, was her uncle, is still so mad at her mom for basically telling him he was a terrible person that he sent this specifically to her daughter to curse her, essentially. It's messy family drama, terrible people, all of that. Why they didn't think at any point, oh, we should just send it back to India, I don't know. That would be my thought. Why are we dealing with this? We could just send it back, give it back to everybody who it belongs to, and then it's all fine. No, doesn't cross anybody's mind, apparently. We have this situation. So he shows up at the house, and he is pretty worried about this whole thing, because he's like, I feel like I'm sending nothing but trouble to my cousin. And he's also got the hots for his cousin. Okay, it's England in the 1800s. We're okay with having hots for our cousins. I don't know how closely related they are. I'm sure it says somewhere in here. I couldn't tell you. I'm hoping they're at least not first cousins, and hoping there's at least maybe they're like third or something, but I couldn't tell you. That's also technically illegal. So, kissing cousins, right? That's what it is. Anyway, I'm so sorry. I had limoncello earlier this evening, so I'm sorry if I get off it crazy at any point. I apologize. Basically, where was I? This is all things that are happening very early on in the novel, and I have to give you some basis for the situation in which we find ourselves. So, the cousins are making eyes at each other. There's also another cousin involved who also kind of wants to be making eyes at her, and it's a whole thing. These guys, like, from India, who actually are from the temple where this stone was originally from and was removed forcibly again from the statue of a deity. They have been trying for years to track this thing down and get it. And they finally figured out where it is, and they are there. So they're also sneaking around trying to get it. There's like a whole thing. Again, why they couldn't just hand it over to everybody is just beyond me. We would have solved so many problems. But then again, we wouldn't have this crazy ass novel if they'd done that. So there we are. This is told throughout in a total manuscript that has been pieced together, telling the whole sordid tale of everything that's happened, and it bounces between varying characters. So the first person to tell the story is honestly my favorite character in the entire bunch, and that is Betteridge, the butler. I think Betteridge is fucking great. He lives his life just out here being fucking loyal as shit to his daughter, the family that he has served for however long because they have been incredibly kind to him, and he just, he's just straight up, this is my people, fuck everything, I'll protect them as much as I can. Good dude. And he lives his life by looking for advice from a very worn copy of Robinson Crusoe. Like, he smokes a pipe, and if he ever has a question about things, he will basically kind of do what I do, I suppose, if I ever take out one of my oracle cards and I'm like, I don't know what to do about this. Here we go. That's how he travels through life, except he picks up Robinson Crusoe, flips through it, and whatever page he lands on, that is the advice about the situation that is currently at hand. I was like, that's a very interesting concept. I've heard of people do that with like the Bible, I've heard of people do that with dictionaries, believe it or not, but the Robinson Crusoe is a new one. Maybe I should pick a novel and I should use it as a divination tool. We'll see how that goes. Dirge is fucking great, and he's my favorite character. He's a wee bit snarky, and I love him for it. And then you get the opinions and writings of a lawyer that is connected with the family. You get the young man who has the hots for his cousin who delivered the moonstone, and you also have my least favorite part of the book, which is of another relation of theirs who is the most annoying, zealous, self-righteous sack of shit. I fucking hate her. Reading her passages were almost painful. I wanted to deck her. That was this book. A roller coaster ride. Wow, I didn't even get, hold on. Yeah, that's how the passages are broken down. I didn't even get to the good part. The moonstone goes missing. The stone goes missing. And that's when the detective comes in. The detective is also fairly brilliant as well. Very interesting guy. I almost kind of wonder if pieces of Poirot were taken from this detective. Like, if Agatha Christie read, I'm 100% she had to have read The Moonstone. But yeah, it just, there's a lot of stuff. There's a lot of things going on. There's some violence, there's a murder, there's a suicide, there's the theft of the stone, there's betrayal, there's just a lot of shit happening in this book. It is fucking wild. It is actually, it went places that I didn't know this thing was gonna go. It got really crazy at different portions. I was like, what is gonna happen next? Fully invested in this thing. It did take me a while to get through it, but that's just because I was trying to read other things. And also, this is my lunchtime read at work. So I was only reading probably like 20 to 30 pages a day. That because sometimes I also get caught up in conversations with some of my coworkers. So yeah, it took me a while to get through it, but this was by no means a boring book. This is a very exciting book. This is a very fast-paced book. Even when it feels like, oh, there's not much going on right now. No, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. So very interesting, and I don't know, for a book that is old like it is, I found it to be incredibly readable. Really readable. To the point that I'm kind of like, dang, I kind of want to read other things by Wilkie Collins. I'm finding him to be a very fascinating person. I don't know totally what to think about him, but from the bio bits and also just the writing in general, I'm finding him to be very fascinating. So I would like to read some of his others. I know, what was his most famous one? The Woman in White, right? Interesting. There was a little bit of bigotry stuff going on and everything, because like this is a book from the 1800s and people don't fully understand different cultures, especially England at the time. They're colonizing the shit out of everything. But yeah, so there was some of that, which is unfortunately kind of par for the course with an older novel. But quite honestly, I did feel, I did give it some grace because, again, that's older book, that's how society felt at the time, but I also did give it a little bit of grace because of them discussing that because of the terrible things that this guy did to this community in India. Like, he was shunned. He was kicked out of his family. He was shunned by society. He basically was a recluse because of the shit that he pulled, which was nice to hear. People being held accountable for their actions to some degree. So anyway, very interesting book, very fascinating. Like I said, fast-paced, bonkers. Loads of characters in here, so you kind of got to keep track a little bit. There is like romancy bits kind of in here, and there's also, there's a character that things go I don't want to give any spoilers, but things go a certain way with this character, and go a certain way with a character that I was like, I knew it, and I'm glad, and yeah. But yes, this I don't know, if you want to read like vintage detective novels and you haven't picked up The Moonstone, you probably should. Don't be intimidated by how thick it is. It is very readable and pretty fast-paced. And yeah, it was a pretty good time, and I do want to read more of Wilkie Collins' work. So I think what did I give that? Was it 4 stars? Yep, 4 stars. Then I also read one other mystery novel, I guess technically. It's not a classic though, it's a modern one. And this was actually a reread because I read this a few years ago prior to having a booktube. It was The Child Finder by Renee Denfeld. And this is a book that is a dual perspective novel. A lot of the perspective is told from the point of view of the child finder. That's what she's called. Her actual name is, my gosh, I forgot her name, Naomi. Her actual name is Naomi. She has dedicated her life to locating missing children as a way of connecting with and atoning for her own past, because she herself was a lost child. And she, probably due to trauma, has no memory of her life before she was suddenly running through a field and a bunch of people found her and took her to a police station so she could get help. So she, didn't have any memory prior to that, and I think she was like, 8 or 9 at the time, I think, when she was found, or what they thought probably was about her age. She is basically dedicated her life, to finding other lost children. And she's really good at it. I mean, she doesn't always get the hoped for outcomes, unfortunately, but she is really good at finding kids, whether they are still living or unfortunately not. This particular case, she has been approached by the Culver family. 3 years ago, their daughter Madison was lost in a state park. They went to go get a Christmas tree, I believe. Yeah, they're choosing a Christmas tree at Skookum National Forest in Oregon, and unfortunately, she got lost in the woods, and no one has seen her since. So some of the perspective is of Naomi kind of going through the process, her usual process of trying to find Madison, as well as reflecting back on her own past, the foster family that she grew up with, including a foster brother who might possibly be a little something extra, and then also, the past that she can't remember. So, and then there's the other perspective is of the Snow Girl, who is a girl who was born of the snow. Basically, she was having hypothermia and she was rescued by a mountain man, but then kept captive by the mountain man. This book, it is also another fast-paced, incredibly readable novel. That being said, there are also some sections of this book that are incredibly hard to read. And the one saving grace, I think, with those particular sections of this novel is that they are in the point of view of the Snow Girl. And the Snow Girl is the Snow Girl because she loved fairy tales. So a lot of things are kind of seen through the lens of similar, like a fairy tale, which is probably a coping mechanism. So those things, it's rough. You can still kind of understand what's going on. What's a good comparison to this novel? I will say it's less direct than reading a memoir such as I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings, but I would say it's through a childlike understanding of things, and thing that I guess a similar book to compare it to would be maybe Room by Emma Donoghue. Yeah. It's rough. I would say I liked this book because of the story that it was trying to tell about a woman who is so determined to figure out her past and also do her very best to help children like she was. Like, that's so commendable. And I found that to be such a beautiful, moving story, and also heartbreaking in its own sense because of her kind of dealing with that trauma still and also not remembering everything, which might be a good and a bad thing at the same time, and just dealing with all of that. Like, I liked that portion of it, and I thought it was very well done that the other sections have this more fairy tale-esque feeling to it. I think that the dual perspectives were obviously needed, and I think that they were well done. So while I say I liked this novel, I do have to say it was hard to read sections of this novel. So I would say this is one of those, if you're unsure, you might want to go online and check. I can't remember what the website is called. I know there's like, is it the one that's like, does the dog die? Is that the one that's for trigger warnings and stuff? I can't remember. I should probably know that, but I don't. I would say just check that out because this has some contents that are a little bit rough to get through. But again, I think if you were going to write about a situation like this, I think this was the best effort to do it without being exploitative or sensationalistic or just not great. I think this was the way to go about it. That's what I mean. She does have a second novel, which I very much want to read, and hopefully that's on my immediate list of books that I need to get my hands on when I let myself go book shopping again. So I will be reading the second novel. It worries me slightly because this feels like a series, but this came out several years ago, and then the second novel came out a couple of years after that, and there has been no chatter since, so I'm kind of like, oh no, is it just two? Very interesting novel all the way around, and I'm hoping to find book 2. I think I gave this one also 4 stars. Yeah, 4 stars. Then I had a couple of other rereads, just because I felt like I needed them. The first of them was one play, and it was The Skin of Our Teeth by Thornton Wilder. If you've been around here since the beginning, you'll know that I think either my first or second wrap-up I ever did was talking about this book, because at the time, in the midst of the pandemic in 2020, I felt like I needed to read this book. I think this was the 4th time that I've read this novel. I've also seen it performed once. Yeah, I read it for the first time in high school. I watched classmates put on a play, put this on, basically. And I also read it around that time as well. I read it a second time in college. I found it to be incredibly entertaining, both times is actually my college textbook from then. A lot of the notes and underlines and highlighters are from that time as well. And I laughed a lot. There's a lot of fourth wall breaks. There's a lot of funny things in here. But I remember at that time also being slightly more aware, because we were covering in class, of like the different like historical contexts, biblical contexts, and you know, just interesting wisdoms and thoughts and things that were going into this, including like the circumstances of when this play was written. And then the third time I read it was, like I said, at the beginning of the pandemic, and I didn't really laugh at that time. Cat, what are you doing? I didn't really laugh at that time. I was desperately looking for some comfort, and that's why I picked it up. And my review at the time said, you know, I found only that you've got to carry on, because as Sabina says, the ending of this play hasn't been written yet. It's kind of how I felt earlier in January. Was I just felt like I needed something. I needed some wisdom, I needed some comfort, and I needed to go back to something that I knew. And I could not... Pink, stop it! She keeps rubbing on the tripod. Just needed something comforting to read, and my brain could not get off of thinking about this book. So I reread it again. It was funny. Like, I did find it funny again. I did laugh a lot while I was reading this book, but it was exactly the type of thing that I did need to read in January. I guess what struck me about this book, so this is... I haven't even talked to you about what this play is about. This is a play following the Antrobus family. A mother, father, and their son and daughter, and their maid, Sabina, who's also kind of Mr. Antrobus's mistress. It's complicated. The thing about the Antrobuses, so... they go through different calamities in each act of the play. The first calamity is the Ice Age. I know, you're like, what the hell does that mean? This is a timey-wimey wibbly-wobbly book as well. It's like the beginning of humanity, but not, because everybody's in like normal clothes for the 1940s, and they're living in a little house in New Jersey, but at the same time, there's also the philosophers and the muses are around doing their thing, and Mr. Antrobus is out here inventing the wheel and math and shit, and yeah, interesting things. And also the Ice Age is coming. So it's a weird, but it's all metaphor, and it's a lot going on. So first act is trying to survive the Ice Age and the glaciers coming. The second act takes place on the Atlantic City boardwalk, basically, and now it's the Great Flood. And then the third act is human destruction. It's not natural destruction, it's humanity's own destruction. It is wars and bloodshed. This family is basically going through all of it, and there's a lot of fourth wall breaks, there's a lot of humor in here, but there's also just an incredible amount of wisdom, and I guess I found it to be comforting at this juncture, because it was a reminder, and it was written as such, that humanity just keeps plugging along. We've gone through it all before. I highlighted a lot more. Like, the amount of things that I highlighted in the final act there's a lot. They're saying, I've lost it. And I say, what have you lost? The most important thing of all, the desire to begin again, to start building. And it's really just kind of dealing with that. The world's an awful place, and you know it is. I used to think something could be done about it, but I know better now, and I hate it. And then somebody else responds further down, I remember what three things always went together when I was able to see things most clearly. The voice of the people in their confusion and their needs. The thought of you, the children in this house, and my books. So, people in need, family and friends, and knowledge. Those are basically the reasons to keep going, essentially. They talk a lot about books and ideas, basically rebuilding the world. I think something that, I don't know, something I really feel good about was, I've never forgotten for long at a time that living is struggle. I know that every good and excellent thing in the world stands moment by moment on the razor edge of danger and must be fought for, whether it's a field or a home or a country. All I ask is a chance to build new worlds. And God has always given us that, and has given us voices to guide us and the memory of our mistakes to warn us. I don't know. I mean, maybe this is my Robinson Crusoe. Maybe this is my thing to dip into when I'm like, what the fuck? What helped this being extrally, that's not a word, extra comforting at this juncture in time to me also was the context of when this was written and why it was written. And this was written basically during and towards the end of World War II. This was written to be a reassuring piece. This was written to be something for morale and to bolster everybody up. That I know this feels like the end of the world, but it's not. It's gonna be okay. We've gotten through it before, and we'll get through it again. Yeah, I just kind of needed to hear that. So, yeah. This is one of my favorite plays, and I highly, highly recommend it. I also highly, highly recommend seeing it performed, because plays are meant to be performed. But reading is pretty good too. What I give us 5 stars. The other reread I did was a picture book. Also slightly for the same reasons, was on my mind a lot. And that was The Page Master, and this is by David Kirshner and Ernie Contreras, and the illustrations are by Jeremy Tiratilli. If you were a child of the 90s, you might recognize this book. Or, if not this book, you definitely 100% watched the movie, especially if you were big on Macaulay Culkin and or Christopher Lloyd, such as I was as a child and still am. This book is cute. I was very much obsessed with this book back in the day as a kid. I loved the movie. And when I found this at my school library, I didn't realize that this was a book. I got so fucking jazzed. I checked this out so many times. Like, multiple times. I know I've talked before about a couple other books that I checked out, like, so many times growing up. This was one of them. I checked this out a lot. Hadn't thought about it in years, and then a couple of years ago, it popped into my head again, and I found this copy online from somebody else's library, I guess. And yeah, I love this. I just love this book. Are the jokes a wee bit cheesy here and there? Yeah, they are. But I mean, it's so beautiful. Like, when I was a kid, I really liked this because of the story, the art. The art is like a big draw of this book. It is absolutely gorgeous because you've got this kind of art, but then you've got this kind of art. See, there's Page Master himself. And then you have like these pages, like, what? Look at that. It's gorgeous. So those were a big draw. Hearing about all of these books that I never read before, and some of them were also on Wishbone. Like, man, I just wanted to read all of these books that were mentioned all over the place, and I think I've read a chunk of them at this point. There's a couple that I have no interest in reading Moby Dick, but I'm trying to read Frankenstein right now. But yeah, lots of books that I was just very interested in. Was like, that's so cool, and it was really cool, and I just had the shit scared out of me about the part with Frankenstein, and just such an interesting book. And as an adult, I also find it to be incredibly charming. Like I said, there's cheesy jokes, but it's so charming, it's beautifully illustrated, and honestly it has a very great message about facing your fears and doing your best to grow and face your fears. And it was very nice to read this as an adult. Very comforting read, and also to reflect back and remember how this book made me feel a little bit braver, because I wasn't quite Richard's level of anxiety about everything in the world. I didn't have like earthquake kits and emergency things, and I didn't have a lot of that as a kid. It was just nice to remember how much I related to Richard as a kid, and how this book made me feel braver as a kid. And I just love that. I love that. I love the message of being braver, and I love the message of finding some of your bravery within books, within reading, with connecting to characters and stuff. I don't know. I just love that whole everything. So yeah, I really liked rereading this, and it was 5 stars. And then the last 2 books I have to talk about are both poetry books. They are 2 poetry collections that I got earlier this month, or rather earlier in January. I actually had a coupon for Button Poetry, and decided to use it on a couple. So the first was Smut Song, and this is by Josh. I should have looked up his last name. It's Tvrdy. I should have looked up how it was pronounced. This is editing Gen of the Future, and I can't find video of the poet saying his last name, but I looked up a pronunciation of the last name online, and it looks like it might be pronounced Verdi. Verdi? Verdi? We're gonna go with that. This is his, I don't know, it's his debut collection, I think. He was 2024's winner of their annual poetry chapbook contest, and this was the chapbook, basically, that he won with. And I wanted to read the previous year's winner, so I grabbed this up. And this is a collection. How do I describe this exactly? It's called Smut Psalm because it is dealing a lot with religion, especially, I think, evangelical religions when you are queer, and also being made to feel like you're terrible or evil for having any kind of worldly sexual desires at all. So it's kind of tackling those things within this collection. I really liked these sections in between some of the poems. It's called the Church Board Interrogation, and it's basically like a list poem kind of deal, where it's questions that are part of the interrogation and then answering them kind of directly, but not at the same time, answering them very poetically. And these are like little interruptions in between the other poems. Like here you have the first one, then you have 2 poems, and then you have the second one, and then another couple of poems, the third one. I really liked that kind of continuation slipped in between all of the other poems in this collection. I found that to be really interesting, and an interesting device to use, basically. Honestly, I found different parts of this to be very emotional, different parts of it to be very reflective or funny, and just overall a very interesting look at things. There were parts of this where I think in some ways, based on just a couple of the poems and how things were phrased, it did kind of remind me a little bit of the works of Allen Ginsberg, a little bit just based on some of the imagery being used in here, as well as a little bit of the ethereal quality of some of the poems, which, to be quite honest, is not my usual thing. I'm not really an ethereal poetry kind of gal. I usually like things to be fairly straight to the point, but it was like an interesting collection. I'm interested to see in what he does in the future. And what was my favorite poem in here? Let me see. Like I said, I like those little intervals with the churchboard interrogation. I guess I'd say maybe it was Smut Song. That might have been my favorite one. I can't 100% relate to everything in here because I am not a gay man. But the bits of trying to reconcile how you're brought up in a religion but not agreeing with that, or diving away from that, or having complicated feelings with that, I could very much 100% identify with. So that maybe some of my complicated feelings are also like, oh boy, this was a lot. But I did still find it enjoyable, and I do want to, like I said, see what he does in the future, because I would be interested in reading a future collection of his. I'm gonna give this 4 stars. And the last book was another poetry book. This is actually by a poet who I've known for a while, not like known personally, but I've known her work for a while. And I could have probably gotten some of her earlier works of the poems that I knew. But I knew that this was her, I believe, latest collection. I've been seeing the ads for it all around. I have been very happy to learn that she was still writing poetry, because I'd never read like a complete collection of hers before, I don't think. But I'd read some of her poems here and there, and mostly because I'd seen her videos of them. Her videos that should still be somewhere up on YouTube. She had there's some things of her performing them at I think either poetry nights or slam poetry evenings or something like that. And then there's a couple of poems that she did a video of herself of her reciting them. And they always struck me, and I probably still have some of them saved in my poem playlist thing somewhere on my YouTube here, because I used to listen to watch people's videos a lot of slam poetry performances, or varying people of videos of people reciting their poetry. I used to watch a lot of those when I was in college. Anyway, it's Sierra de Mulder. This is her latest collection, is Ephemera. And yeah, so I've been seeing the ads for this all around, so even though part of me was like, I want to read some of her older stuff maybe, I saw this on something told me, no, you should read her latest stuff that came out. I was like, you just should, and we can worry about the older stuff later. We can get those collections later. So, I did. I read this collection. When I can tell you guys the emotions I had while reading this is, I love poetry. I have loved poetry almost my entire life. I Love it. You've probably seen some of my other wrap-ups when I've gotten extremely passionate about poetry before, especially who I consider my favorite living poet, who is Rudy Francisco. I've gotten very passionate about how much I love poetry in the past, and that still 100% stands. Like his poems and Billy Collins, and there's so many other poets that I could name, but it's all jumbled in my head right now. Like I just love poetry. I love that even if you can't 100% relate to it, it can still make you feel emotions. You can still pick up on the emotions that are within the poem. I love seeing the beautiful ways that people can describe terrible things. I love just all of that. I find poetry to be one of the most fascinating and beautiful mediums with which to tell your truth, if that makes any sense at all. I just, I love it. And a lot of the time there is a poem or several poems or a couple of lines or something like that. Most of my poetry books have poems either starred, if they're my favorites, or maybe they're underlined or highlighted, or I go crazy with a pen in there because some things just hit me so fucking hard and I love it. But quite honestly, I don't think, even saying that, I don't think I have ever read a collection before that made me feel as seen as I felt when I was reading this collection. This collection has some stuff going on in here. It is dealing with some grief. It is dealing with grief of, I believe, the loss of a grandmother, as well as a pregnancy loss. And this was just, I mean, I was already like, dang, this is rough. This is a lot. Oh man. Like, I'm reading this and I'm going through here, and then it gets to this one poem that I don't think I can even talk about. And, like, I'm reading this poem, and the next thing I know, I'm fucking bursting into tears. Like, I don't know. I felt, like I said, 100% seen by this collection. It is beautiful. It is heartbreaking. It ends on such a hopeful note that oh man, it's so much. And I will be 100% reading the rest of her collections because my god, this woman can write. But, which I mean, I knew already, but now it's like there's something more personal here. But this hit so hard, and I'm so glad that the little piece of my gut said, no, you should read the newest one. You can get the other ones later. I'm so glad for that, because this was, I think, something that I really needed to read, because last year of having gone through similar circumstances in general, the loss of a grandparent and stuff. So, yeah, I needed this. I needed this book, and I'm really glad that it's out there in the world. And I can only hope that someday I can write something that makes somebody else feel like I do about this. I didn't even tell you. I rated that 5 stars, obviously. Okay, so that was everything that I read in January. And I would call it overall a really good reading month, because I read a lot of things that I liked, that were comforting, that were beautiful, that broke me a little bit. I had a pretty good start to the reading year, at least. And yeah, I would suggest all of these books that I read in January. if you are so intrigued by that. But yeah, that was everything that I read. I hope you enjoyed hearing my thoughts overall. Let me know if you've read any of these books before, or if you have any to suggest to me based on what I talked about today. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you for always watching, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.